So today we're going to be taking a look at the Alternative Future of the World Part 2 Reformed. Now, if you haven't seen Part 1, I highly suggest you go and watch it, as you'll sort of find out what's going on in this episode. And yeah, let's get into it. So in the last part we had Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We had Romania and Moldova link up. We had this war go on in the Middle East where Azerbaijan split Armenia with Turkey. Turkey got Syria. Iran lost a tiny bit of land, and North Yemen broke away. We also had another war, which was a huge war in Asia, which resulted in a Chinese loss and a PDP victory. And yeah, we're going to actually take a look at some of the world alliances. This is NATO. Now I'm going to look at the UHS-II, which is, I'd say, on the sort of red side, the biggest alliance. But yeah, that is the UHS-II for the moment. That is how big it'll get. Let's take a look at some of the other alliances. So we have the Gulf, or the MEDA, which is the newest alliance, which is the Middle Eastern Defence Alliance. And this is the MEDA, so it's basically made up of all these countries here. And Iraq, which were on Turkey's side, actually do join the MEDA, which basically defends them against Iran and other attackers. The PDP we'll take a look at now is contained up of these nations here. You've got Taiwan, you've got Japan, you've got Korea, you've got the Philippines. But we see some more people join. So we actually see Malaysia joining in this pact. And we also see Myanmar, who get a brand new government, also joining the pact. So yeah, these are the alliances at the moment. A lot of Asia, if you know probably this bit here, aren't joining the alliance for some weird reason. Or they don't want to join the alliances. Simply these two here are brand new countries. And they sort of don't really want to... I guess they don't really want to join any pacts at the moment because they're kind of scared. These two are new as well. These are new countries here, so I don't think they'd want to join. And Pakistan doesn't like, they sort of isolate themselves. But Pakistan's worried about India's strength, so they decide to join the UHS-II. So here is the heightened sort of, this is what's going on. I'm actually going to take a look at the Rio Pact quickly, which are all of these nations here who are in the Rio Pact, I believe, are all of these nations. And then we sort of have Africa. Now we see another alliance forming up. So we actually see the West African Defence Pact, or the WEDP, which is basically formed by Niger, Mali, Senegal, the Gambia, and we also have places like Liberia. That's probably not Liberia. And then we have other African countries. Now this is the probably worst alliance, the poorest, because it's just an African alliance. I mean, Nigeria, kind of scared. They probably should be. Anyway, so we're going to take a look at sort of an expansion of NATO for the first part. These videos are going to be extra long, so sit back, relax, and we're going to take a look at the sort of we're going to take a look at the expansion of NATO. This one's going to be a lot more about alliances now, and that's what I'm going to sort of include a lot more. So I think the first thing to happen would be a war going on in Africa. Now, what war were you saying? Well, it'd be quite an interesting war. So it's going to involve the top 4 countries of Africa. So North Africa is going to basically involve. Oh my god, this is annoying me. Right, boom. 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 There you go. Right, so. Hold on, I need to do these. So, these countries will not be getting involved. Anyway, let's get into it. So this breaks out. Algeria and Libya are good friends. Morocco and Tunisia are good friends, and they get in a bit of a dispute. Egypt, they don't like Libya. They don't like Libya anymore. But then they don't like the blue team. So we see think we'd see Egypt go on the red team. So this is African War. It's not looking good for Morocco or Tunisia, to be honest. I mean, it does look better though, as you see Spain and Italy decide to join into helping their former colonies. The US gets involved, which internally gets France involved, and basically war is now on Africa. This is how the CSTO and the PDO are going to basically show down. So the CSTO, which are made up of these member nations here, these member nations, basically the CSTO wants to just, I think I'm forgetting a couple of countries. Laos and Cambodia joined as well. I forgot to colour them in last time. Yeah, but basically the CSTO starts supplying North Africa, or the red team of North Africa, and that's just how it breaks out. So let's get right into it. The first thing we see is the Algerian invasion into Morocco, which goes pretty successfully as they push down into the north. Mauritania takes its time to break away and try and take back all of the Western Sahara. That's Western Sahara that Morocco took, but this is what Morocco took, pretty much all of this. So the Western Sahara is really weak, so they just sort of collapse a bit, and the Moroccans managed to push back the Algerians and push into their country. So it's just sort of a standoff here. These guys are going to be fighting a lot, with sort of fronts moving back and forward. So we see the red team now start to get attacked, as Italy, France and Spain are now sending out landings and blowing up, because they're blowing up stuff along here, and they're also attacking Egypt. Now Egypt, I don't think would lose a lot, but we'll see. So Algeria and Libya come together, and eventually they begin to push into Tunisia. They take the capital Tunis, but an Italian landing stops them from completely capitulating the country, even though they get extremely close to, as they've got this tiny part left. So this is sort of the war effort, but we see something else. We see the Western Sahara breaking away again from Morocco, and this goes quite successfully for them, as Morocco wasn't really too worried, and now the Western Sahara own. They push up, or the rebel groups push up into Morocco, and Morocco looks like it's kind of screwed at this point. They're getting invaded from both sides. So Morocco carries out a campaign, which basically what they do is they remove a lot of troops from the Algerian front, which causes them to basically lose a lot of their front line. But they gain a lot of land back, so they move troops up here and push back the Algerians a tiny bit, causing the Algerians to come in from the south and push them further back, which basically pushes them here. They also come back down and push through, cutting off the Western Saharan desert and taking the country back, and they also push back the Algerian offensive. After doing this, they've just gone on the huge offensive, and Spanish troops begin to land. Spanish troops land on the coasts or around here, as the Italian troops land in Tunisia. They both battle to now try and liberate all the Algerian coast, as Morocco crosses over into Algeria. In Egypt, we see them getting heavily supplied by the CSTO, and now they're going to go on the offensive. So Egyptian troops managed to get into the Mediterranean with their navy and begin to attack the island of Sicily. This is our direct, basically declaration of war. I can't cut them all in, but NATO gets involved. With NATO involved, this isn't going to be good. Egypt's just attacked NATO. UK isn't. I wouldn't say the UK is happy about this at all. They're probably not happy about this at all. Their former colony invading. So the NATO gets all its troops involved and begin to push. They push through Algeria and manage to capture lots of Tunisia back. They begin to push through Libya to capture the capital Tripoli, which is here. But alternatively, we see the Algerian capital Algiers finally fall. After this, we see a full invasion of Algeria, and we see a huge invasion of Algeria until eventually it's just left with desert. Now they decide not to go into the desert as it's kind of useless, but they continue to push through Libya. They capture the capital Chipotle and now push further along the coast. They manage to capture cities along here, and now they're just left again with desert pretty much. So this is all desert. Their final goal is to attack Egypt. Now they try that once, it fails. It actually may lose in land because Egypt has got CSTO support and they're quite strong. They managed to push back the NATO advance into Libya, but can't recapture the capital as it's heavily locked down. The Allies then decide to move into the Algerian desert as it gives them a good position, but they meet some rebel groups along the way. These rebel groups aren't happy, so they have to do a bit of a cut manoeuvre, and eventually, after a lot of fighting against rebel groups, they just sort of collapse the rebel groups and they're gone. Now it's the war in Libya. This is going to go well. Oh boy. So Libya, basically all the NATO push around the coast for the second time and push far into the desert. Egypt sends troops, which basically they send troops across here, and the troops line up on the border for a huge sort of encounter. So this is the Egyptian border. That's the way they're holding the Allies down. But they don't manage to. A breakaway comes into the desert, which causes them to move around the desert or the desert sort of border, and they're trying to attack Egypt from the south. This doesn't, I wouldn't say this goes exactly well, but it doesn't go awfully. So now they've basically taken all of Libya. Egypt, like this isn't Libya anymore. This part here, this weird part here isn't Libya anymore. This is just Egypt. Egyptian troops are just chilling there, and yeah, I mean, let's continue the war effort. So this kind of gets tiring, this war, as Egyptian troops push again through the coast, and NATO isn't using their full force. They don't want to, but the worrying thing is that Egypt pushed so far along they captured the capital Chipotle and start an advance into Tunisia. NATO troops push up as a spearhead and they begin to rush around here. All the basically Egyptian troops rush around here to get back to a defensive line. They get cut off as they've just started, and this is getting bad. They're trapped, and eventually Chipotle and Tunisia is recaptured, and a lot of troops are gone. Eventually they decide both to make peace, as this isn't going nowhere, and they're just pushing each other back and forward. So yeah, we're going to take a look at said peace treaty here. So we see a pretty decent peace treaty going. So we see Morocco get a tiny bit of Algeria here. Well, not a tiny bit, but they get Algeria here. They don't get Algiers because that's their capital. They've got to keep that. But they get a tiny bit here, and also get a border extension. Now, this isn't the biggest border extension, but it's quite cool. Not cool, but it's not the biggest border extension. That's what we'll say. They do get it though. They get land-ish, just not a lot. They just get like a little sliver of the desert. But yeah, I mean, it's free land. It's free land. You can't really deny free land. I think they would probably have to reconsider their claims in the north, actually, because that's kind of ugly border. I think we'll just do a tiny little sliver of land given over to Morocco, because Algeria is basically useless to them. They just basically wanted to start beef and it didn't really work out for them. So here is the new, let's say, Moroccan borders, which they haven't done bad, to be honest, taking land. I mean, that isn't too bad, that land extension. Tunisia opts in for a bit, and they do get a bit. So they also get a border extension, which, for them being a small country, it doesn't go too bad for them. They get a lot more coast, or a lot more, I'd say they get a tiny bit more sea access. I mean, yeah, they do. They get more sea access, which is quite good for them. Now we're looking at Libya. So Tunisia, basically, they just get another border extension into Libya. And this time the border extension's really tiny. Now Libya's kind of useless, so, well, I mean, they're just deserts here. The country's just desert. They got all their coast here with all their population. This is just desert. So Tunisia just doesn't really want stuff back. Egypt didn't really lose, so they don't lose anything. But now we're going to take a look at the new alliance map. Now, Italy, well, basically, Algeria is given a new government, and this new government opts to ally with the US and join NATO. So now if I colour in NATO, we have 2 new members, so we also have Ireland as well. Now I'll show you more of them. Spain, Benelux region, Denmark, Norway, Iceland, Greenland, French Guinea, Italy, Austria, Hungary, Croatia, Bosnia, Slovenia, these guys down here, Turkey, Poland, and yeah, that is NATO at the moment. Now we have Algeria in NATO, Libya stays out, Morocco opts to join, but Tunisia says otherwise, but Tunisia does face a little bit of a scary threat as the UHS-II is getting quite chunky now. I mean, just so that, I mean, CSTO is getting quite chunky. I mean, they have these members in here now. I mean, it's not a huge alliance, but it's definitely growing something. It's around there. So we do see the first African countries join the CSTO, and these are Egypt and Libya. This basically sets off a bit of a rivalry, as there's always going to be a rivalry like across the border here. So eventually Tunisia bites the bullet and they just join NATO, just for protection. So here we have the new alliance map. CSTO, or NATO, I'd call them NATO, I think, still. But yeah, we have NATO and CSTO. Now NATO or the CSTO goes on a bit of recruiting, and they don't like China. Now Mongolia decides to join. You also see Indonesia joining finally after a long time with them not wanting to join. They finally join in the CSTO. So we have Indonesia and the CSTO now. Now China, Xinjiang and Tibet. Now these 3 don't like each other. China doesn't like Xinjiang. Xinjiang doesn't like China. China doesn't like Tibet. Tibet doesn't like China. And Tibet doesn't like Xinjiang. And altogether they all hate each other. So what are we going to do about this? Xinjiang is a Russian ally. China is a Western ally. Tibet is, so if you draw, that's like half the country. This half like China, this half don't. Well, basically if you think of it, this country here obviously as Tibet don't like China. So what happens here? Xinjiang joined CSTO. Tibet stay out of it, but we have these 2 republics joining. Myanmar obviously joins, as I said. These 2 old lines now. China's in it. But Tibet doesn't like China for what they've done to them in the past. Now, you say by differences, I mean, you've got Malaysia in there. But they can't bite the differences. Tibet doesn't like Russia or Xinjiang. And they're really unaligned. They love India, but then China, they don't like China at all. So, what would we do? We could say they just, like, you know, they just go rogue and just leave. They can just go rogue, but then it'd be kind of silly. This African alliance down here, which involved these guys like the Gambia, Senegal, Niger, these lads down here, I think they'd expand. So they get all of the West African nations to join them, and also basically get more Turanians to join them. Western Sahara, I forgot to think about these guys. They still get independent, but they join NATO. Nigeria is heavily worried on what's going to happen. So they decide just to sort of stay out of it. Because this continent is now quite dangerous. Not so much down here. This is peaceful. I mean, yeah, not obviously not you two and you two, but like this part is quite peaceful. I'd say this part's alright. Meh, not really. Hell no. Uh-oh. Yeah, basically parts of Africa are now really scary. So, I think NATO could go to war with all these countries for sort of reconciliation. And that's what I think they would do. So they'd go to war with this pact for basically greediness and land. So they sort of bring down the African Federation, and they want to probably bring up a new one that they know. So America basically wants Algeria's help, and they decide to form some sort of special pact. Now they get the UK and the France involved, they get Canada involved, but they also form it with Algeria. This is nuggy colour. So blue does not represent NATO, this represents the allies at the moment in this pact I'm talking about. And they actually get Algeria, France and the US basically all agree to this pact that they're going to go after this sort of West African Federation. That's probably what it's called, the West African Federation. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's what is going on at the moment. So they decide that they're angry and they go to war with the West African Federation. Is this a mistake? No, not at all. These guys are extremely weak. That's probably why they made an alliance in the first place. But we see some interesting things happening. Mauritania opts out as they don't really like their alliance anymore. And some countries leave as well. This includes Liberia, which is this this country here. This guy here. And the Gambia opt out. Now it's these guys against NATO. But you already know what's going to happen. So I think to start off, we're going to have, this is what's obviously going to happen, is we're going to have the Mediterranean and everything. We're going to have obviously some countries that are just not getting involved, and obviously that is these countries here. So yeah, let's get into this war scenario, is what I'd call it. So US troops basically arrive in Algeria up here, and so do French troops, and now moving across. This gives the West African Federation time to push into the desert, and that's what they basically make advantage of. They push up along the desert coast and are now just sort of flooding in because they're used to desert. They don't really believe that the US is going to get them that quick. They do. The US is already here and they're now already pushing them back. Now their armies are really weak. They've probably, some of these countries down here haven't even got armies. I think Senegal has got a tiny one. You haven't. Yeah, basically some of them haven't got armies. So they're pushing through out of Algeria, and the Algerian forces then begin a full-on push into Niger and Mali. Niger and Mali are the strongest nations, so they managed to hold them off, and they're asking for reinforcements. These guys, if you look probably at these guys, these are all useless. You, and you are all useless, so they can't really rely. So they've got to fight NATO, the strongest alliance in the world, or they've got to basically fight France and US, the strongest countries in the world, and they're the probably least strongest countries in the world. It's not going good for them. They're basically getting battered. They get cut. Niger gets cut in half and loses it immediately. this part of the country rebels and just doesn't want to be controlled by the US. The US respects that and just goes after Mali. The southern part of Mali just wants independence, and that's what they do. Mali just sort of decides to collapse, so does Niger. And that's these tiny African countries. Now, how on earth are they going to get here? I don't know. But I think they'll manage to do it. So they push through into these countries here. They take whatever these are. Maybe Pensacola or something. What? That was a weird name. Not it's that. It's not that. They push into this African country and take it. Senegal just... They don't collapse as quickly as the others do. Now this boy, they can't cross over, because then they'll get them angry and they'll declare war. So it's like, it's a what they do. They take Senegal and the Gambia, which is good for them. They can't get here. Now they could use the coast. The thing is though, this is desert. The entire country's desert. They're just going to have to run through desert still. So they decide to fund rebels, which work, and the rebels basically say, we're going to be your government now and take over the country. So there we just had 3 countries all on their own defeat about 7. That's how powerful NATO is. Now, this is how we're probably going to see the expansion of the CSTO. Now, if we take a look at the peace treaty here, we're going to get countries joining NATO, countries joining the CSTO. So, obviously, Mali gets split up. Niger also gets split up. Well, basically, these have a straight line for their border. So, we're going to take a look at the alliances. Now, these guys here are not getting punished at all. The Gambia is tiny, so they don't really deserve to be punished. It's just these guys who sort of got themselves into the war. Then Nigeria did get involved. I'm surprised Nigeria didn't. But anyway, we're going to take a look at the updated alliance map now, which, damn, I've taken a look at a lot of alliance maps. And there's been a lot going on in Africa. I need to make some wars go on in, like, Europe and stuff. So, obviously, NATO can't attack Serbia because they're worried about them being in Europe, as it doesn't really work. Because they're in the CSTO, and the CSTO would just declare war on them, and then they'd get World War III going on. I don't think anyone wants that. So obviously this is NATO right here. We've got NATO into Africa. Now, this is where they declare themselves the WDO. Now, this sounds a lot familiar. It's not. I'm trying to change it as much as I can, but this is where they declare themselves the WDO. So they get these 2 nations joining in the WDO, but they're quite isolated. So obviously they join. Mauritania, they don't want to join. This makes NATO look ugly, but these 3 join the CSTO, which is worrying for these 2, as they're basically they're just trying to live, you know. Now, even if I did, they'd still be quite weak. And that the CSTO are basically, they dominate Africa a little bit more. The CSTO, I'd say. They've got the strongest countries. But sorry about that, guys. So we don't see these 2 join on their own. We actually see the Gambia want to join NATO, and so does Senegal, and so does Liberia. This doesn't change anything. Now we're going to take a look at the CSTO are actually getting really huge now. So obviously, as we know, CSTO is sorry, I got such bad hay fever. So this is the height of the CSTO. Now, they're not a small alliance anymore like they used to be. They are dominating world power, I'd say. They just stretch across the earth a lot more. Now, we actually see Georgia and Azerbaijan leaving NATO, as they want to be alone, sort of. But they're kind of scared now. So I don't even know. So, but we see the PDP obviously as one of the strongest. Tibet bites the bullet and joins. Yeah, blah 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 blah. So that's enough of alliance talk, because I've done so much alliance talk in this video. So yeah, I think we're going to take a look at one more scenario, then that'll be the end of the video. And by the way, this video will not be edited, it will be the next one I do, not this one. Now, I don't know what scenario to take a look at. I mean, I have panned out, but I don't know. I mean, I don't think these would go any. I don't think there's no point of there's no point of doing something here, or up here, or here. This is for next episode. Or here. I think I'm just going to round it off here, guys. We've had 2 African wars. Yeah. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.